first impressions are important, which is why I'm starting this video wearing my cool sunglasses, to make you think I'm cool. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy my cool sunglasses. Although, I have determined a major flaw in my cool sunglasses. I cannot read my notes with them on. So as you will have detected from the title of this video, today I am ranking the beginnings of all the Nancy Drew PC games. But before I get into the ranking, we first have to establish my definition of a beginning and my tiers. When I say the beginning of a Nancy Drew game, I'm not talking about the opening letters, but more so the first 5 minutes of gameplay after that. And I'm asking myself, how exciting, intriguing, and memorable is this opening? Does it hook me, or will I be scrolling the Nancy Drew subreddit with my non-mouse hand? Now, the tiers. Right at the top, Love at First Sight. These are truly the best openings. I love them from the very first sight. It's pretty clear. Don't know why I'm even bothering to explain this. You're not a child. Okay, my second tier, I'm Seated. It's not the biggest, boldest, most impressive opening of all time, but it still hooked me enough to want to keep going, to want to play more. Middle tier, Whelming. I'm not underwhelmed or overwhelmed. I am simply whelmed by this opening. And then one stop down from there is A Bad Omen. It's an inauspicious beginning and makes me think, I hope the whole game isn't like this. Okay, my absolute bottom tier is 0.4 hours on record. This is a reference to my reading negative reviews of the Nancy Drew games video, when someone said they quit a certain Nancy Drew game after only 20 minutes, which I think is disgraceful. But yeah, these are openings that are so bad as to make you want to quit the game immediately. But let's keep this opening short and sweet and get to the meat of the video sandwich. Starting at the very beginning. Whoa. Secrets Can Kill, original 1998. And I am immediately breaking my own self-imposed rules by counting Nancy's opening letter as the intro to this game, but I think it gets a pass as it's accompanied by an animated cutscene. And the animated intro I find very stylish. To be honest, you don't get a lot of cutscenes in the Nancy Drew games, so it's exciting to me that this one starts out with one, and one that's so fluid and contains so many characters, which I guess is like the freedom of hand-drawn animation versus manipulating 3D sprites. And you know, it starts on a body bag, which is a bold way, I think we can all agree, to open a children's game. Memorable, you could say. And this also means that it's one of the few Nancy Drew games to feature a murder. So that's pretty exciting, especially because the murder happens like right away. You're right into it. Like, we're not pussyfooting around here. Not pussyfooting around this murder. The murder is like there, bam, from the get-go. The bam was the sound of Jake Rogers falling down the stairs, by the way. So, you know, immediately the stakes are very high. But now we get to the tricky part. Is it love at first sight, or am I truly just seated? I think it's love at first sight, you know. I do have a soft spot for Secrets Can Kill original, I will admit that. But I don't think it's my bias talking here. I think this genuinely is a pretty dang exciting intro. A good start for the Nancy Drew games. I don't think, as much as I love it, that Secrets Can Kill really holds up to the promise of the intro, but dang, it grabs you. It grabs you like the killer with Jake Rogers before he pushes him down the stairs. Oh my gosh, that's such a metaphor for this game. It grabs you and then it pushes you down the stairs for the rest of it. The whole rest of the game is your descent down the stairs, gradually going bam, bam, bam on every step. And then I guess at the end, when you finally die at the bottom of the stairs, that's the climax, the most exciting moment, which is when Nancy gets the gun. Okay, but I can't talk about that because that's an ending, and we're not here to talk about those. Okay, and then Secrets Can Kill Remastered, disappointingly, does not have a single body bag in its intro. Why not? What's the deal with that? Rather, you likely will spend the first 5 minutes exploring Aunt Eloise's house. It's like they thought, well, we can't really beat that body bag, so we might as well not even try. To be fair, the opening to this game is technically the opening of the original Secrets Can Kill as well after you get past the intro. And I guess one exciting thing that can happen is Nancy accidentally locking herself inside a cage if you input the wrong code in Eloise's safe, but that's only an if. Like, there's no guarantee that that's what's gonna happen. Something that's probably guaranteed to happen for every player is they pick up a dime. It's not really as exciting as seeing a body bag get wheeled out of the school. Now that's cinema. So I think accordingly, I'm just whelmed by this opening. I think that actually might be too nice, because like what even is there? I literally just said it, you just pick up a dime. Or is it even 0.4 hours on record? I feel like I know myself, and I know that I'm probably not gonna put any games in this category. Because there's something about starting a new Nancy Drew game which just fills you with so much joy and excitement. But we'll see how it goes. And then Stay Tuned for Danger, which is chronologically the second game in the series after Secrets Can Kill original. You started the game by chatting to Maddie. So going from murder to chatting with a family friend is quite a decrease in drama. And while this conversation hints at intriguing things to come, I take issue with the fact that it's really hard to get Maddie to talk about all the different death threats Rick has experienced in one playthrough. I would know. For my Stay Tuned for Danger recap, I basically did like a complete playthrough of the game where I went through and tried to get every dialogue option and kept reloading. It took me multiple reloadings to get all the information out of Maddie. She's not an easy toothpaste tube to squeeze, you know what I mean? And perhaps there's a video concept in like ranking the characters you chat to first in each Nancy Drew game, because it's a common theme, and they vary wildly. Maddie would go somewhere in the middle of the ranking. She's sweet, but not the most memorable conversationalist. I will give this one a whelming, because, you know, at least you get to talk to someone. At least someone's there to, like, give you the little guided tour intro to the game, whereas, like, Secrets Can Kill Remastered, you're just thrown in kind of at the deep end, except if the deep end was like a kiddie pool, because it's really not that exciting. I need to move quicker than this, because as you well know, there are 34 games. I will not be ranking the dossier games, because I don't remember them well enough, and I've done 3. And I've been recording for 15 minutes. Good golly. Okay, Message of Haunted Mansion. It starts with this spooky exterior shot, which really establishes the atmosphere. You know, you got lightning cracking, the light turning on in the window, and then again, you are left to your own devices. But unlike Secrets Can Kill Remastered, at least in this game, instead of like the first 5 minutes being all you do is pick up a quarter, in this game, you get to read, "Listen, my child, to this story of dreams." The most iconic poem of all time. Take that, Walt Whitman, I said it. But yeah, at its heart, it is the same kind of opening as Secrets Can Kill Remastered, where you're kind of just let free to roam. And I think it's a testament to how good this game is, that even with such an uninspired opening, it's still a fan favorite, and I'm one of those fans. And it's the first time we get to snoop inside Nancy's suitcase, so that's a pretty historic occasion. I think it's a little bit better than Secrets Can Kill Remastered. But am I being too nice still? I guess I'll see how I feel later on if I want to adjust things, move things down a peg or two. Treasure in the Royal Tower, as well, has a rather humdrum start, which just sees Nancy handing over a letter to Dexter. And it's notable in that way for being the only Nancy Drew game, I think, where we see Nancy actually mail one of her opening letters. And I think this is a good example of how some of the games, the earlier ones especially, make up for more humble beginnings with some memorable, kooky characters. Because who could forget Dexter Egan in a hurry? These games with softer openings really need to lean hard on good dialogue. And Treasure in the Royal Tower, whip-crackin' dialogue. I think I'm gonna say I'm seated. I'm free to adjust. This is a loosey-goosey tier list at this point. We're not locked in. It's not locked. Oh, and speaking of good dialogue, the final scene, so much happens in the start of this game. You've got Maya's disappearance, the call from the kidnapper, the secret passage. This game knows how to set a scene. A final scene. When you discover a secret passage within the first 5 minutes of the game, you know it's gonna be a good game. Love at First Sight, I feel more confident about that one. I think it has more legs to stand on. Whereas, Treasure in Laurel Tower might only have, 2 legs. The final scene has 8 legs. Like an arachnid. Enjoy that image. Secret of the Scarlet Hand. This one starts with a cutscene. Exciting stuff, exciting times, where it's Nancy being shown the Pakal carving by Joanna. And again, this is a historic moment for being the first glimpse that I think we get of Nancy in the entire series. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you see her little silhouette standing ominously in the shadows of the museum. And I think it really makes sense for this game to have this intro cutscene revolve around the Pakal carving as the plot really orbits around that piece. Okay, and then the cutscene ends and you're given a lore dump by Joanna. She takes a big fat lore dump on you. But again, the dialogue is quippy and entertaining while also being informative. So I think I will give this game a pass for starting with a long conversation. It's really Joanna telling you your purpose in life, or at least your life in the duration of this game. I'm gonna say I'm seated. Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, we again go with an opening where there's so much going on. Firstly, you get this phone call from Sally, which is so ominous. It feels like it could be the opening to a horror movie. And then follow that up with the ghost dogs attacking the house. This opening is so memorable that many fans who first played this game as a child reported being unable to continue past this point, or imagined later ghost dog sightings due to the power of the terror of this scene. But I did forget a step in the middle. Between the phone call and the ghost dogs attacking, you have the misfortune of having a conversation with Red Knot. And I think that's the one edit I would make to this beginning if I could. Just remove the conversation with Red Knot entirely. I think the opening would be even more chilling and atmospheric without it. Maybe it would have scared children even more, but it kind of breaks the tension a little bit. So it's not a perfect opening, but it's pretty damn good. I feel like I would put it in Love at First Sight, but I just said that I would edit it and there'd be changes I would make if I could. So I can't in good conscience do that. The Haunted Carousel, we're back to a slower start where you're just exploring the hotel room. It's a classic explore a room opening. Then you leave the hotel and go enter the whale's mouth to talk to Harlan, and enter in this whale's mouth. It's looking camp right in the eye. It's a Pinocchio core moment. Who doesn't love a novelty-shaped building? And then of course you have a conversation with Harlan, and he shows off this underwhelming haunting video, which is pure comedy. So it's a bit more dynamic than the opening where it's just exploring a room, or an opening where you're just talking to someone. So I'm seated. Tragedy on epic proportions. I've already finished my tea and I still have so many games left to rank. Danger on Deception Island, another game that starts with a bit of a cutscene where you're hanging out with Katie. She's carrying her sack of groceries, and you discover her boat's been ransacked, which then leads into a conversation with Katie, but at least you have a little bit more context and a reason to care from the very start, because you've witnessed a byproduct of the tensions in Snake Horse Harbor. And in fact, this conversation with Katie, I think, does a great job at introducing the complex politics and intrigue going on in the town. And then, of course, you're left to your own devices to explore. But I think this is an example of how openings can be so different depending on play style. I always go right to the sandwiches once Nancy's unpacked, but I'm sure that's not true of every player. Another player might immediately kill Nancy by biking without a helmet, or immediately kill Nancy by kayaking without a life vest, or do some plumbing. I think Nancy has done more actual plumbing than Mario, gaming's most famous plumber. But that's beside the point. I'm seated. I do think the mystery in Danger on Deception Island is one of the strongest in the whole series, and all the suspects have such different but compelling motivations. The strength of this mystery is clear from the very beginning, from this very first conversation. Secret of Shadow Ranch is my favorite Nancy Drew game, but to judge it from its opening, it really shouldn't be, as it immediately has you making multiple phone calls, which isn't really a riveting hook. This is actually the game that the 0.4 hours on record tier is referencing. Not that I trust that person's judgment. God forbid. It might be a quieter opening, but as soon as I enter that cozy living room and the cozy Shadow Ranch music kicks in, I'm home. It's a bit of a cardinal sin that you're not even having a conversation with someone face to face, but over the phone? Yeesh. But I am sensing a bit of a pattern between these games, where there's kind of like a more dramatic opening that alternates with a more slow-paced opening, probably due to the 2 games per year development cycle. I think they would work on, like, obviously 2 games every year, and one would be a bit more high effort, and the other one would be, like, a bit more low effort, which explains Creature of Kapu Cave. See, I'm fighting multiple urges. I think, like, part of the reason I like this opening so much is because I like the game, and I like being in the environment, but to judge it from an objective point of view, not that I'm being particularly objective, this is all incredibly subjective, but maybe I need to be like a teensy little bit objective here. I probably should put it in Bad Omen. I can't bear to put it in 0.4 hours on record, but I probably should. But they do mention the Phantom Horse almost right away, so that saves it for me. How could that person quit after they hear there's gonna be a Phantom Horse? How could you do that? I just don't understand some people. Curse of Blackmore Manor. To remind you what the opening of this game is, you hear a threatening beast voice from the bushes calling Nancy's name and see some glowing eyes also in the bushes. Now this is how you open a video game. Any game would be instantly improved if it opened with a threatening beast voice from the bushes. That's how every Call of Duty campaign should begin, in my opinion. And then you meet Mrs. Drake and her theatrical accent and glimpse the bonkers interior design. Simply, it's iconic and it's deserving of love at first sight top tier. Secret of the Old Clock. There's a lot going on in the opening of this one as well. You've got a suspicious car, a kitchen explosion, jewelry theft, finding out that you're in the 1930s. And I think the opening is paced well, where it intersperses conversations with action. So you're not just sitting there for one long conversation. You're sitting there for fragments of conversation that are then interrupted by intriguing happenings. A lot of breadcrumbs are scattered for me, a pigeon brain, to peck up with glee. Physically, I'm a human, but spiritually, I'm a pigeon. So I'd say I'm seated. Last Train in Blue Moon Canyon begins with Laurie Gerard's dramatic monologue and disappearance. Laurie Gerard is the drama. I would also fake my disappearance for dramatic purposes if I found myself aboard a haunted mystery train with a secret passage. She was so real for that. And I think on a more technical side, this scene does a great job at memorably establishing all the characters and distilling their personalities. And as well as being dramatic, it's got moments of humor too, like Laurie hyping up all these celebrities, and then it comes to like Nancy and the Hardy Boys, and she's like, and whoever these people are. It is fantastic. I am all aboard with this opening, you could say. Danger by Design begins with Minette crashing out, and you also meet Heather. This, for me, would be a red flag when starting a new job. First day on the job, you hear your boss in the other room screaming and throwing things. This is the point where I'd quit a job. But is it where I'd quit this game? No, is the answer. I don't think it's as intriguing as it would like to be. You know, I'm not sitting here wondering like, I wonder what the mysterious reason she could be freaking out is, because I'm like, this woman is just high-strung and high maintenance. I think she has some serious issues going on that are none of my business. You know, there are people out there who are just like that. They don't necessarily have to have a mystery attached to them. But again, it's a bit more dynamic than simply exploring a room or simply chatting to someone, because in this game, you're chatting to someone and hearing someone crashing out in the background. It adds another layer to it, you know? And Nancy's suitcase is lost again. A classic trope. I think it's whelming. Creature of Kapu Cave begins with POV. You are the creature of Kapu Cave, trashing Quigley's camp. And then Nancy is introduced to an icon, history's greatest male manipulator, Big Island Mike. And from there, Big Island Mike finagles Nancy into doing free labor for him, his MLM, multi-level Mike scheme. It's definitely memorable for introducing a memorable character, and a memorable economy. And it does really hype up this creature, which is more than the rest of the game can say. Dare I say I'm seated? There always feels like there needs to be some gray area between these tiers. I feel like I say this every time. Maybe I just need to start creating more tiers. But then it feels ludicrous. Like, how many tiers is too many tiers? Yeah, I'm leaving it there. Big Island Mike is such a larger-than-life character, and not just because he's big. He's, like, big personality-wise as well. And then we have White Wolf of Icicle Creek literally starting out with a bang. What better hook than insinuating a wolf set off a bomb? But then it slightly goes downhill, much like a rogue snowmobile. Such relevant metaphors. Anyway, it goes downhill because you then have to have a phone conversation. And not just any phone conversation, you have to talk with Chantal. And Nancy volunteers to be her maid, which snowballs. It does produce an ominous feeling in the gut. You know that yes, this is going to be another Nancy job simulator. But the manic edge to Chantal's voice lives in my head rent-free. I think the explosion makes it worthy of I'm Seated. Legend of the Crystal Skull, which, lest we forget, begins with a skeleton man chloroforming Nancy. Then you wake up and there's a strange old lady trying to get you to drink a mysterious concoction. And then you meet e-boy twink icon Henry Boulay. I think this is a pretty intriguing and mysterious opening, and it gets a love at first sight from me. Phantom of Venice, which starts in a rather unique way for the Nancy Drew games. It's got a flashback/forward from when Nancy is trapped in a room rapidly filling with water. It's giving record scratch freeze frame. Yup, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation. It is a fun way to open a story and not utilized much in the Nancy Drew games. I think they really could have overdone it and started almost every game that way. But I deeply respect that they showed restraint. Although I don't really find Nancy drowning in a room rapidly filling with water that interesting or even unusual. Likely place for her to be. But I think it's still a fun way, like I say, to open a game. Haunting of Castle Malloy. Buckle up, people, for multiple reasons, because this game starts with Nancy driving, and she's talking on her phone to Ned, a cardinal sin and against the law. And it's proved why that is a law when Nancy almost crashes her car and almost does a hit and run. She almost crashes into an old lady. You've got distracted driving and near vehicular manslaughter in the first 2 minutes. It's an important life lesson that this game teaches you. Don't talk on the phone while driving, or you might run over a banshee who's really a senile old lady who lives in a bog. And then Nancy trudges out of the car and up to the house, and tries to get in, and Donnell's like, no, I'm not letting you in. So then you have to, throw a rock at the window to get Kyler's attention, which is another important life lesson this game teaches you. All problems in life can be solved with a big rock. This opening is pretty iconic. Again, maybe the game doesn't hold up to it, but it's love at first sight, baby. Ransom of the Seven Ships. You arrive at the island to discover that Bess is missing. As you depart from the plane, disembark, George runs up, trying to get the attention of the pilot, to no avail. If this beginning gives you a foreboding feeling, it's not wrong. That's a good instinct. I also would like to get back on that plane. And I should note this is the first time we see George in the flesh, and it is not a good first impression. I think they did her and Bess very dirty with the character models in this game. Again, it's quite a foreboding opening. So even though the game doesn't deliver on a lot of its promises, I would say that I'm Seated. dare I say. I am feeling like I should make some adjustments. I don't yet have a 0.4 hours on record. Warnings at Waverly Academy begins with an omniscient flashback of Danielle getting trapped in a closet. It's another POV moment. POV, you're the black cat. One of the only examples in the Nancy Drew games of a scene where Nancy isn't present at all. And possibly the only example of seeing through the culprit's eyes. And then present day, where you have an awkward conversation with Corinne. And the conversation with Corinne is interesting. I wouldn't say she's the most compelling or interesting character you meet in the first conversation in a Nancy Drew game, but she is interesting in that she seems to fail all her dialogue checks and make herself seem like the biggest loser. She's definitely got personality. I do like that flashback, but is that all this opening has going for it? I think it's actually worthy of a whelming. That makes me want to move Secret of the Scarlet Hand down to whelming as well. I think I will. I think I will do that. And maybe Treasure on the Royal Tower also. So maybe this is the adjustment I have to make. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm agreeing with that person who quit Secret of Shadow Ranch after 0.4 hours on record. I'm moving this down as well, and this. Okay, I'm satisfied with that for the time being. We'll see if I change my mind. It does hurt me quite painfully to put Secret of Shadow Ranch in the bottom tier. Sometimes in life we have to do difficult things. We have to make difficult choices. Trail of the Twister opens with a twister, funnily enough, and Nancy finding a stash of cash on the doorstep. By this point, her interactive knows how to make a titillating opening. Does this opening reflect the level of excitement in the game? No. Nancy, you've got a big storm coming. By which I mean a lot of chores. A storm of chores. I think I'm seated by this opening, you know? Shadow at the water's edge. You've got a little cutscene where Nancy walks into the Ryokan, and immediately the portrait of Kasumi falls off the wall, causing a rift in the family, some family drama, and then you meet Suki, the terrifying animatronic cat, who looks like a character from a Roblox Five Nights at Freddy's knockoff. This intro is peak in that my interest is very much peaked. Two of my favorite things in media are ghosts and dysfunctional families. What more could I want? And I think this also might be the Nancy gets told to leave speedrun record. I think this is the fastest that happens in any of the games. Am I seated or is it love at first sight? I feel like it could go harder. All the ones in this category make really big swings with their opening that this game just doesn't do. Like maybe if Kasumi jumped out of the wall and went boogly boogly boo, then that would be a top tier opening. But she only knocks a portrait of the wall. It's kind of lame in comparison. The Captive Curse. This one starts off with a flashback way back in the past to the old times when everything was sepia colored. And you see this poor damsel in distress interrupted from gathering her mushrooms by the monster who chases her in a scary and sinister way. I think it's a fun introduction to the monster story, which shows its inspirations on its raggedy monster sleeves. And then in the current day, you get to do this matching game sent down to you by Lucas in a bucket. I think the matching game is definitely the weakest part of this introduction. It's an odd choice. I almost think the game would be better with just nothing there. Like, if this is your first time playing a Nancy Drew game, you'd be duped into thinking this is, like, gonna be Freddy Fish difficulty. And then, of course, saving the best for last, you get that dramatic phone call from Ned, the controversial Ned phone call. I, for one, love the drama. It is the cheese in my mousetrap. You captured my attention. First I'm a pigeon, now I'm a mouse. I don't even know who I am or what I am, but I know that I'm seated. Oh, and you know, Alibi and Ashes has quite a juicy opening, potentially the most juicy opening in a Nancy Drew game, if only because it's the game where she gets immediately arrested after being trapped in a burning building and having to escape. And in that burning building, she could burn to death in a fire in the first 30 seconds of booting up the game. This is a firework of an opening. The fire works to make me excited to play the rest of it. That pun was so fucking labored it needs to join a union. Let's just move on from that. This is love at first sight. This is a great opening. Again, it really takes a big swing, and it hits. It pays off. I had to look up a no commentary walkthrough of Tomb of the Lost Queen to remind myself how this game opened, which doesn't sound positive, but it has a better opening than I remembered. Not that I remembered anything, but there's a sandstorm, you got John Boyle collapses, there are hints of a cursed tomb, almost everyone working on the dig leaves, and then you explore the tent. All of that is really quite dramatic and intriguing. Too bad in reality the game is 95% being stuck and playing with sticks and 5% drama and intrigue. More like Flop of the Lost Queen, Tomb of the Flop Queen, Tomb of the Lost Flop? Tomb of the Lost Fuck. But on rewatching the intro of this game, it made me realize that the sandstorm graphics are much like sand itself. Rough. But I do enjoy this one moment where John Boyle, feebly raises one hand. It's peak comedy to me. He's like a frail Victorian lady in a faint, a swoon, pass the smelling salts, fetch the brandy. This is a nine-seated kind of opening, there's quite a lot going on. It's not just chit-chatting or let me look in this drawer. Oh, there's nothing in that drawer. Let me look in this other drawer. Oh, look, a key is in this drawer. I haven't found any locked doors yet, though. Let me close the drawer, Deadly Device opens with an exterior shot where you get to see this, really nice snowy atmosphere. Too bad we don't get to experience any of that. I love a cozy winter setting in a Nancy Drew game, and it's just an injustice that we missed out on it in this one. Why even bother to set the game at winter? I guess there's something about getting stuck because of a snowstorm. I try to avoid the Deadly Device. It's better for my health. But then you do get a cinematic intro of Nico getting fried like leftovers in the microwave. Oh, and what I have written in my notes about that is simply the word murder with 4 exclamation marks. So that's how I feel about that. And then there's a Zoom call with Victor. He doesn't even have the decency to meet with Nancy in person. Show me some respect. I think it's an I'm seated. It's not quite love at first sight because of the phone call, but like I say, it's someone getting murdered in a dramatic, horrific, and unique manner. I'm seated for that. Okay, I am going to be a bit of a contradiction here, because Ghosts of Thornton Hall opens with a phone call from Savannah, but it's a bit different, because it's like Nancy getting awoken in the middle of the night by this ominous and kind of vague phone call, asking her to go to this island, and then she arrives. She gets dropped off in this boat, and everything's like fog and overgrown vegetation. It's just so atmospheric and foreboding. In other words, perfect for this horror-adjacent Nancy Drew game. It makes the stakes feel high, and then there's the return of a beloved character in Savannah, which is exciting, although confusing if you play this game before Shadow at the Water's Edge. I'm seated. The Silent Spy also begins with a flashback, this one of Nancy's mom playing the piano and receiving a cryptic phone call. And then, surprise, surprise, shocker, Nancy's suitcase is stolen. How many times has Nancy's suitcase gone missing / been stolen now? Fool me once, etc., etc. But in this variant on the theme, you've got this character Alec who tries to catch the thief and fails, and then he has a little chit-chat with Nancy, and then she goes and checks into her hotel. This is another one of those intros that is a bit more elevated than simply chatting with a character. Yes, you do chat with Alec, but it's a bit more dynamic than that. There's action involved. Even if I hate Alec. If I was to do that tier list of people you have a first conversation with in a Nancy Drew game, he'd be at the freaking bottom. I don't remember anything about that guy except that I hate him. But I do appreciate that it starts with the flashback of Nancy's mom, which is a great intro for Mommy Issues Simulator. I'm seated. Shattered Medallion. Not a game I love. But what do I think of the beginning? You get an intro to all the participants of the reality TV show and Sunny, iconic character Sunny June, and then immediately go into this train track puzzle, which is supposedly the first challenge of the reality TV show. You know I love trains, so this opening gets brownie points for that, but this is a reality TV show. Is this entertaining TV? Is this an entertaining opening to a video game? Think if I tuned into like the new season of Survivor and the first thing the participants were doing was like laying miniature train tracks. Would I turn off the TV? Maybe. I probably wouldn't even be watching TV in the first place. I've never seen Survivor, but I feel like they do more interesting things in Survivor than that usually. Like maybe fish with their bare hands? That's what I imagine them doing on Survivor, catching fish with their bare hands, not putting together miniature train tracks. And I'll say this, Sunny does not make a memorable first impression. Unfortunately, I do love his chunky punk boots, though. They're what I'd call stompin' boots. I do think this might be worthy of 0.4 hours on record. Because truly, what is it even doing? The only thing I'm giving it brownie points for is the train tracks, and that's just because I like trains, so that's very much based on, like, personal opinion. And like I say, I need to be a teensy bit objective here. And my objective opinion is that the Shattered Medallion sucks. Did I say objective or subjective? I think both are true. It's objectively and subjectively bad. Labyrinth of Lies opens with a freaking phone call. I thought we were past this point by now. I thought we'd learned. I mean, it's with the Hardy Boys. I guess I love the Hardy Boys. And it's not even a Zoom call like in The Deadly Device, so we don't even get to see the Hardy Boys' beautiful faces. But I guess like this is like a side effect of them having gotten rid of the opening letters and Nancy's case files. Now they have to introduce the plot with a big fat lore dump conversation. But the phone call does get interrupted by a scream, and Nancy interrupts the play rehearsal that's going on and confuses the play for real life, which is quite funny, and then she chats with Xenia. I think this is a 0.4 hours on record kind of opening. Maybe I'm just being harsh at this point for the sake of being harsh, but like, you hear a scream and you think it's something exciting, and it's actually they're just putting on a play. There's no nugget of intrigue in that. Sea of Darkness opens with a ship-crashing flashback, which is technically before the opening letter, but I'll accept it. And then it's the classic opening move. Have a long conversation with a character. In this case, Dagny. You know Dagny's going to be an interesting character, though, because she establishes her and Nancy's dom-sub relationship in her very first bit of dialogue. I do think, though, overall, this is more of a bad omen kind of intro. It's like Danger by Design, where it's again mainly chatting with someone. There's like a little bit extra sprinkled in, but it's not really enough to push it up to a higher tier, at least in my humble opinion. Okay, Midnight in Salem, a controversial Nancy Drew game. One that I don't think is all bad, but the beginning of this game has this scene in Austria where Nancy's at this castle, and it's a lot of just standing there as a character you never see lore dumps at you from just outside the room. Then you solve a simple puzzle, and there is a choppy chase sequence interrupted by multiple fades to black. You do see someone who appears to be some kind of magician vanish at the end, which is kind of exciting, but I think this is perhaps the worst executed Nancy Drew opening. They're clearly trying to do something, but they're really not pulling it off. It is not a good first impression. It is a 0.4 hours on record moment going like, oh, is this the vibe of the game? Now we get to the most recent game, Mystery of the Seven Keys. It opens with this scene where it's like, will the real Adela Cherna please stand up? Where Nancy is kind of in this situation where she has to determine which of two women is the character Adela Cherna, because they're both claiming to be her. And it's a fun moment because Nancy actually gets to use her detective skills and be like, well, this coffee was here at this seat, so I think you're the real Adela Cherna, etc., etc. And then in the dialogue, you've got some callbacks and like fan service kind of moments, which is honestly rare for the Nancy Drew games, at least to reference past cases and dialogue. It doesn't happen that much. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think there should have been more of those in Mystery of the Seven Keys, to be honest. Lean on that nostalgia. Use it as a crutch. I'm lapping it up like a little kitten drinking milk. This, I think, is maybe the strongest part of the entire game. It's a more interesting and interactive twist on the typical conversational opening. There are like dialogue options that genuinely change what is said in the conversation, and it contains a fun little mini mystery and shows Nancy at her most competent. Like, I love to witness her doing actual detective work. I love to be impressed by that. I think it's whelming. Or maybe, you know what? It's a bad omen. I'm thinking about it compared to these other ones. I do want to say these are kind of whelming. You know me, I do want to kind of bump all of them up, but I gotta populate the tiers fully. I created these tiers. I gotta use them. You know what, Silent Spy? Maybe moving it down to whelming. And I think I'm gonna do the same with Ghost of Thornton Hall. Kapu Cave might go down a tier as well. Oh, now I'm rethinking everything. I need to just hands off the mouse. Like, just let it lie. That's it. That's my list. This is the end of the video, and it doesn't really matter what the quality is like. We only care about beginnings today. But next time, I'll be ranking all the endings of the Nancy Drew PC games. So like, comment, subscribe, maybe become a member if you'd like to see that. And let me know what your favorite beginning out of all the Nancy Drew games is.